Hello everyone, this is Melissa and Ian with Havencraft, and this is part of our ongoing series on Cartomancy and Tarot Spells. Today is part of the Tarot in Depth portion of that series, and we are covering the Judgment card. Now the portrayal on my deck is from the Churro Marchetti Gilded Tarot Royale. I don't think we have another deck out right now.
I'll find one. It is, which is loosely based on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck iconography as redone by a more talented artist.
Yes. So, let's see. In the Sermons de Ludo Kumali, which is the oldest known list of the trumps, this card is La Justicia, which means the justice. And that's really influenced a lot of the definitions. It's been known by a couple other names, which we'll get into here in a minute, including what it was known in the Tarot de Marseille, which was actually translates to the resurrection. And really, those are the two different major disagreements over the card, is whether it's interpreted as this moment of judgment or this moment of resurrection, or both. So, okay.
Yeah. Here's a completely different one. This is 20, right?
Yeah.
Thoth.
Here's the Thoth portrayal, in which case it's the Aeon instead of judgment or justicia or resurrection. Okay,
You want it different.
Yep, I did. Thank you. In the 18th century tarot... Oh, nope, I skipped. I should probably do the Visconti Sforza first. Really, I know what I'm doing.
Caffeine.
Yeah. The Visconti Sforza has a robed, kind of dark dour figure that's wearing red gloves or has red hands, holding a sword, who has a long white beard at the top of kind of a dark card. It's in really dark browns. There are two cherub-like figures who are holding trumpets, and then below them are what appear to be bathing figures. One may be an older person with a long white beard, and two are of unknown gender and are sort of peering up. Why they're bathing, or at least it appears as if they're in a bath, nobody really knows. I've heard lots of different interpretations, but no consistency on that. In the 18th century Tarot de Marseille, there's again figures of unknown gender looking up at the sky. There's a single angelic being with a very dark halo and wings of red and gold playing a trumpet while sort of diamond-shaped droplets or sparks of fire or some unknown thing fall from the sky. Most of the later decks end up based off that Tarot de Marseille imagery where there's a single angel with a trumpet. There's no longer that sort of wicked, dour figure with the sword in the background in most of those. In the 18th century Tarot de Marseille, the idea basically wove through the ideas of Judgment Day, Resurrection Day. Everyone's going to have to go face the end and make some kind of answer for the things they have done or not done. As time went on, the religious significance actually kind of got reduced. Where it becomes interesting to me is that following the 15th century, where there's that dour, godly figure, it wasn't reduced, the religious influence, because people were worried about it not being secular enough as if like secular was a good thing. They were worried it was sacrilegious or offensive to God's authority to have really clear images of him on a deck that was used for playing cards.
Yeah.
So
This was not okay. This could even potentially get you in trouble with the church for not taking God seriously enough.
in the 18th century, help me pronounce that so that I don't end up saying...
No, because I'm going to pronounce it like lunch meat too.
Right. I don't know. It's baloney. I don't know how that's supposed to be pronounced as a historical location.
Bologna, I think.
Okay, thank you. Local church officials actually asked printers to remove the Pope, the Popess, the Emperor, the Empress, and any depiction of God, and had the Last Judgment, which is this card, changed so that it just depicted an angel. And that's where you start seeing the Pope, the Popess, the Emperor, and the Empress as these sort of Moorish, robed figures of sort of ambiguous religious authority rather than an actual depiction of the Pope.
Yeah.
So that's where you lose the Pope hat on the Emperor.
On the Pope.
Or on the Pope, thank you.
And then the Pope eventually becomes the Hierophant in some decks.
Yeah, in the 15th century game of Minciati, which is a sister to the tarot, which has 97 cards instead with 40 trumps and a fool, they also went through and stripped out a lot of the religious iconography because it was considered offensive to the power of the church and to the power of God. And a lot of the tarot decks that we have now, including Rider-Waite, the images are drawn from that period of them stripping out all of the religious significance. So one of the things you end up hearing from pagans a lot is that these decks don't have any religious symbolism for the Abrahamic faiths because they were originally this pagan system. But actually it has to do with the fact that the church said, hey, you're insulting God's authority, make the decks more secular because they're used for secular things.
Right. You're insulting God's authority. You wouldn't want to do that, would you?
Yeah.
There's an implied big stick in the background there.
Now, if you want to look at an actual spiritual tarot deck that was used for magical things, pick up the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's Victorian deck. It still has all of the Abrahamic religious significance because the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn includes the Abrahamic powers as part of the powers that they call upon.
Yeah, if you actually pay attention to... So, anyone who's done a brief course in ceremonial magic has run into the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, which is a Golden Dawn thing, basically. Anyone who has done the Golden Dawn version notices that they call on archangels from Abrahamic tradition. Yeah. Almost like they still recognize the power of Abrahamic deities and entities. Done now.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you pick up a deck that strips out that religious significance that relies upon the Abrahamic stuff, such as the Thoth, then it's going to have something like the Aeon and pictorial representations of Nuit Hadid, Ra Horkut, and Harpocrates. I can speak, really, I can. If you pick up a deck that's entirely stripped of any specially aligned religious significance, you end up with this as one of the cardinal virtues, more like justice than the Archangel Gabriel come to judgment. So this deck has this huge splaying huge splaying different presentation based on which deck you pick up, what time period you're picking it up from, and who influenced it.
The other thing to note is that depending on which end of the spectrum you're on, or somewhere in between, it changes the meaning of the card somewhat significantly.
Yes, it does.
The meaning of the final judgment of God in Abrahamic tradition is very different from the meaning of the cardinal virtue of having judgment.
Yeah. So, and it really influences that fool's journey, since this one follows the sun and comes before the world. Okay. Okay, so in some decks, Judgment and Justice are actually reversed. And Justice comes at this point in it, and Judgment comes way, way earlier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh,
6.
Almost.
Further complicating it, because if you pick up a book, it's going to define it based on its position in the Fool's Journey, and you end up with these flipped definitions between Judgment and Justice.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do my best to take this card that is interpreted massively differently in multiple systems and come up with something that's relatively consistent across all
11.
of them. And this one, it's 11. That's brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's Strength and Justice. They get flipped back and forth between 8 and 11.
Yeah, Strength and Justice get flipped.
And then
Justice and Judgment get
also
flipped. It's not a complicated system to learn. I keep hearing that. I keep hearing people tell people, oh, the tarot's a really simple system to pick up.
Here's the thing. If all you want is the one book, Rider-Waite, and the one deck, Rider-Waite, and you're not going to worry about historical context, alternate interpretations, or nuance, then it's a very simple system to pick up, relatively.
That's fair. Okay, so in the Rider-Waite deck, this is Judgment, and it represents renewal or outcome. The interpretation is that this is the judgment that you pass through on your way to eternal life. So in the cases where eternal life in tarot symbolism is enlightenment, or the attaining of your final goal as represented by the world, then this would be you sort of being assessed by either an outside power or an inside power as to these Sorry about that, got cut off by a phone call, which is what happens when you are recording class videos on your phone. Yeah, if you would like to donate for us to get a better camera setup,
I'll be getting the donate button on our website fixed in the next couple of days.
Yay! So we were talking about how in the Rider-Waite system, this is the card of judgment before you pass on to eternal life or enlightenment. It can also be the interpretation where you're passing through judgment on the way to your final goal. Whether that judgment is internal or external is one of the big debates about this card. Are you being judged by an external force or an internal force? But we'll get into that
If you're a hermetic, they're the same thing.
Yes. If it's reversed, this is weakness or difficult deliberation, inability to come to a decision, and pusillanimity.
Definition?
Thanks.
This is an educational experience for me, too. Give me a second.
No, I'm going to try and define it. It's a Catholic concept.
Okay.
It's essentially cowardice or refusing to accept the judgment that you know that you should.
Okay,
so a lack of courage or a lack
judgment,
of resolution,
basically.
Running from resolution.
Okay.
Pusillanimity.
That is somewhat Catholic, yes.
Yes. Well, it's actually like it's one of the Catholic anti-virtues.
Oh, the 7... Because it's not... Because there's...
No, it's not one of the cardinal ones, but it's one of the things where...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So... Where was I? Book of Thoth, that's where I was on this card. This is a really, really disjointed class. We're going to do our best. The Book of Thoth has this as Aeon. Be every act an act of love and worship. Be every act the fiat of a god. Be every act a source of radiant glory. It tends to represent a final decision in respect of the past, a new current, so sort of a new way of proceeding forward in respect of the future. And it always represents the taking of a definitive step. It tends to also get represented as a fiery and spiritual break from the past, moving forward into the future in the Book of Thoth. So, in Golden Dawn, this is the spirit of the primal fire, and it represents final decisions, judgment, and determination of a matter without there being any appeal you can make on the material plane. So it's done. It's said. There's nothing that you can do to reverse this.
Fiat, fiat, fiat.
Fiat, fiat, fiat. Mathers is judgment, and it represents the determination of a matter. Reversed, it's postponement of results, delay, or a matter to be reopened later with extra clarity.
Okay.
Atela, judgment, dedication, intelligence, conception, reason, having a correct opinion, the literal power of reason as something that you should seek to attain. In the philosophical interpretations of this card, that's one of the things you come back to over and over and over again, where this literally represents the ideal of attaining reason. If you would like to know more about that ideal, just Google the Age of Reason, and
sort through the steampunk.
Yeah, and sort through the steampunk. It represents strong belief and really strong sentiments. So, you think you know the truth so well you can act on it. Reversed, it's arresting a decision, being unable to come about it. Deliberation that delays decision, weak-mindedness, again, pusillanimity and naivety.
For once, Atela is almost on board with everyone else.
Yep. Therians, it is the last judgment, and this literally represents resurrection from the grave, the dying on the material plane, leading up to sublimation and elevation. Abstraction of the self prior to attaining enlightenment and escape from material existence. This is the deliverance card. So Therians really took it in this is spiritual renewal, this is the generative force, this is eternal life, this is very much a spiritual card for Therians.
So if you pull it with the devil, you should be concerned.
On the mundane plane, because he did include this one, it represents the ideal that there is an angelic part of us that has perfect reasoning. Yeah.
I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, I haven't found the angel inside me. Definitely found the devil. It is a sign of deliverance from narrow thought and the hampering conditions of the soul. Paul Foster Case, Judgment, and it is fire, the burning away of the flesh so that the soul can proceed forward to the ultimate goal, which is, of course, enlightenment. For them. That's not my ultimate goal. It can also represent the operation of undercurrents of force that are not easily determinable, but which you can see affecting your life. So this would be some outer power has made a judgment and taken action upon your life in a way that affects you without you being able to determine whose hand is upon the wheel. So that's the other way Paul Foster Case interpreted it. It tended to also represent a favorable outcome, renewal of hopes, or the betterment of conditions following a long period of difficulty. Ill-dignified, the decision goes against the querent. The outcome is beyond the querent's power to change.
Yeah.
Ouspensky had it as judgment, And it was the resurrection. It was the constant victory of life over death, eternal life, creative activity following death. So you have died, and now you are going to go on and be recreated or create yourself anew or go into a new life.
I'm going to be a skeptic here for a second and note that the second law of thermodynamics disagrees with the concept of the constant victory of life over death.
Thanks. Oh.
Sorry.
Okay. So there are some overarching themes, regardless of whether you fall in this is the resurrection card, where one aspect of your life has entirely ended, and now you are going on through this transition where you will be judged by outside forces, and then you will go on and become something new. Or it's this internal process where you're having to come to a decision about your life, and hopefully all the other arc of the Magi's journey or arc of the Fool's journey will have taught you how to make the correct decision, and you and only you will judge what you have done, and you will come to a conclusion at the end that will require some kind of a transition. So regardless of whether it's an inner or an outward thing, there's definitely this element of, okay, we're at the second to the last card in either the Fool or the Magus' journey, right?
If we're in the Magus' journey, isn't it the third to the last card?
Yeah, it is the third to the last card in the Magus' journey.
We are very close to the end of the journey.
We're very close to the end of the journey. The next card is the world. What the world represents and how that tweaks this definition we'll get to in a minute.
Well,
but you, at this point, have collected your harvest from the Sun card. You've learned all these lessons. You've gone through all of this pain. Now you get to apply that to this final step of the journey. And you have to decide, am I happy with where I'm ending up? Or am I going right back through the rest of it? Am I worthy of this thing I've taken all these steps to attain? Or am I going to have to start again at the beginning? So, there's elements in all of these of there having been an awakening that leads you to have a better perspective as you are reviewing and evaluating your past experiences, learning from them, and making decisions from your future. So it is an integration card. It is a card of being in a position to look at the past, see it clearly. We're not at the Moon card anymore. Decide what you want to carry forward and what you don't want to carry forward. We're not at the Sun card anymore. We've made those decisions. And actually stepping forward into what you determined you wanted for your future. So clearing up misunderstandings, putting the past behind you, finding absolution. Whether that's from an external power or an internal power. Okay.
Do you feel like you covered definition?
I want to talk a little bit. No, we haven't talked about it reversed yet. Before I talk about it reversed, I want to talk about whether you're being judged by your own internal higher genius. Sorry,
You've been watching Sherlock?
No, that was actually a reference to Hermetic law.
Yes, but it also sounds a great deal like something out of Sherlock.
Oh, okay. Sorry, got a little confused there. Or whether you're being judged by an external force. If you're in certain schools of thought, it doesn't really matter because the outcome is the same. If you're in other schools of thought, it matters a great deal. So rather than making up your mind for you, I'm going to tell you what it is for me. In my mind, regardless of whether the divine is an outside force that has authority, whether we wish it to or not, we still have final authority over our own lives, including whether or not we accept the decision of some kind of an outer force. So I'll give an example of if I decide that I'm going to worship the Norse pantheon, then regardless of whether those are the true gods or not, I could still, via my free will, change my mind and worship someone else. That may be a horrible mistake. I may be wrong to do so. I may damn myself so I never get to fully walk the tree of life or whatever, but it's still my choice and they can't change my mind for me. So in the end, judgment is in your hands. Now, maybe you're Christian and you're watching, like, there are Christian people who watch our videos, and to you, that's part of the final judgment, accepting God's authority and moving forward trusting in it. Okay, you still had to accept. So in the end, the decision is yours. So I think it's kind of a moot point, this argument back and forth over who's making the decision, who's making the judgment call. Because whether you're making the decision to accept an outer force's judgment of your life, or you're making the decision to judge your own life, the primary decision is still in your hands. The emphasis here would be on trusting that after everything you've been through, you're in a good position to make it. And that's why the card's coming up upright. Now, if it's upside down, judgment is not a great place for you right now. Take time to deliberate. Take time to reassess. Now, this can be, and we'll talk about a little bit of card combinations, past, present, future, in a minute. This can be, yes, there is an outer force that's judgment against you is not great. But largely it represents needing time for further deliberation, needing time to make sure that the power of reason is actually being applied here. So let's talk a little bit about that power of reason. You keep, every time I bring it up, you say something distracting. So, Apprentice, what is the primal power of reason in Hermetic philosophy?
Oh, geez, thanks. So, in Hermetic philosophy in particular, it was an attempt to combine essentially pure logic as taught by ancient philosophers with spirituality of a particular type. And so the idea is that there is a spiritual higher truth that we can attempt to understand through the application of this force called reason, sometimes perceived to be logic, and also sometimes perceived to be intuition-ish.
And hopefully gnosis.
Yeah, and the ultimate goal is that you combine the two and arrive at gnosis, which is a state of knowing, which is the ultimate in spiritual pure reason, and as close as you can get to this idea.
Will you go turn off the heat?
Yeah.
You did very well, Apprentice.
Thank you.
So let's talk about gnosis for a second. Gnosis is supposed to be the combination of 3 different kinds of assessment that are applied in an active state of knowing rather than in a passive state of trying to understand. So you have epistemological, which is I have learned from books. I have learned facts. You have apperceptional, which is I have learned from what I've been through, my experiences, literally my perception of things. And you have transcendental, which is beliefs.
Yeah.
Something that goes beyond what you can quantify or explain using facts or perception. So this is something
Actually,
you just...
there was a really good pop culture example of all places in Star Trek Into Darkness.
Okay.
You're right. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical.
But I just
know.
That's transcendental.
Yeah.
In the case of judgment as a philosophical idea, you are supposed to combine these 3 things and take a good, hard look and step forward in an active state of knowing that you are stepping forward in the right direction. If it's upside down, you're missing one of them. You have the facts, but you don't have the know inside of you, that belief, that fervor. Or you have the fervor, but you don't have the facts. Or you have the facts and the fervor, but none of the experience. It is not a great time to move forward in an active state of knowing and trusting your own judgment, because you're missing one of those. So go get it. Now, it can be that an outer force is judging against you. If you are pulling this for a legal matter and it is upside down, it is probably an outer force is judging against you.
That actually segues quite well into types of readings.
Yep. So we'll first start with past, present, future. Past, big decision. A big moment of transition, a big moment of having to trust in your past experiences and your perception and your know-how and your beliefs as you move forward. If it was upside down, that didn't play out so well for you. Maybe you hesitated on making a judgment and you regret that. Maybe you made the wrong one. Maybe you went ahead and you made a judgment lacking a piece of information and only found out later how wrong you were. Because it happens. We sever ties with a friend because someone tells us all the awful things they're saying behind our back, and then you find out later that you were lied to about the stuff that they said. Or you break it off with someone because you think they're cheating, only later to find out that why they were so distracted was their grandfather was dying. Like, we make decisions as best we can in the moment, and sometimes they're wrong. It happens.
Almost always working from incomplete information, and we do the best we can.
Now, if it was upright, the decision probably benefited you. In the present, we've largely gone over these internal conflicts and having to come to resolution and having to move forward. And that is where it comes into, what's the world to you? Because in the present, what should be in the future position of your reading is the world. If you're pulling judgment upright in the present, what should be in your future position, if this is like a 3-card reading, is the world upright. Now, if it's not the world, or the world is upside down, then there's some questions you need to be asking yourself. And this period of introspection and examination of the past is going to be different. And where that ends up coming up is, what's the world to you? Because maybe it's the wrong thing. Maybe that's why judgment is upside down in the present. What you've worked your butt off for, what you've taken all these steps for, what you've harvested for and cleared out doubts about and conquered the devil to get to, isn't actually what you want. So reassess. Or maybe the road to getting it is not what you think it is. So reassess.
I had a Disney song pop into my head.
Now, congratulations if you're pulling judgment upright in the present position and the world upright in the future. Congrats. That is a great reading to pull. Now you have to keep it. Now you have to fight to keep it. This path is never over. Which brings us to a point Ian wanted to make earlier about crossing the abyss.
If you're interpreting this card as judgment by an internal force, and you're doing it within a spiritual or mystic system, many of them essentially have the ultimate self-judgment as crossing the abyss, which is a concept.
Learning yourself
fully,
learning your place in the universe, confronting all the things about yourself you do not like.
And it can be really traumatic, and it's generally considered fairly advanced. But in the context of now you have to fight to keep it.
You're never done crossing the abyss.
You cross it, and you confront all of these things about yourself. They don't vanish now that you've confronted them. They're still there.
And then once you've attained that goal where you've confronted them and you've gotten to the next step in your journey, you just start right back again at the beginning.
Now maybe you know what they are. You're familiar with the obstacles. There's a great poem for this. Yes, I'm recommending a poem. I can't remember the name of it anymore, but it ends with, "I walk down a different street." Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. That's essentially about doing the same thing over and over again. And, you know, you do something, and then you know the path, and you're familiar with the obstacles. And maybe eventually you'll make a different choice, but but they're all still there. I think she's looking up the poem right now.
We actually used it for a different card, but we'll go ahead. It's called Autobiography in 5 Chapters by Portia Nelson.
Right. And this is specifically applicable in the context of you're never actually done making choices. You're never actually done.
But it's a good poem for judgment, so I'll go ahead and read it. 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. 5. I walk down another street. This is good for judgment, where you've fallen into the same hole so many times that now you see it coming. And now you could pick a different road. And you will get to your destination easier every time you pick a different road, by having good judgment, by looking at the past, at mistakes you've made, and choosing a different way.
That's what experience is for.
So let's talk about different card combinations.
You didn't mention the future.
Oh, future.
You're going to have to make a choice.
You're going to have to make a choice. If it's upside down, you're not going to have all the information you need, or there's going to be forces that oppose you. If it's upright, you have everything you need to make that decision. Which brings us to a good card combination. This card combined with... what is the name of the card? Because all I can think is the Magus. Magician. Thank you.
Or the Magus, or...
You have all the tools you need to make this decision. Trust your judgment. You are in balance, which again, combined with the Temperance card. You have all the tools you need to make this decision. Be patient with yourself.
This card with any of the aces, this is the tool you will need to make this decision.
This card combined with certain other cards means it's someone else's hands at the judgment. If it's combined with the Hierophant, if it's combined with the Emperor, if it is combined with the Wheel of Fortune, or the Devil card, it's somebody else's hands, generally, that are forcing this decision. Now, if it's the Devil card, yes, it's somebody else's hands, but you got yourself there.
Right, you gave them that decision.
You gave them that power. If it's the Wheel of Fortune, yes, it's somebody else's hands on the wheel, and you could wrench them off.
Yeah.
If it's the Emperor, know that's somebody else who has authority over you. If it's the Upside Down Emperor, I'm sorry. They have authority over you.
Yeah.
If it's the Hierophant, that authority is probably a good thing. If it's the Hierophant upside down, you don't have quite enough faith in it.
Yeah.
So, I think that's common card combinations.
Especially in the majors. In the minors, let's run over like 3 of them. Judgment and the 2 of Swords. You may need to sever a connection.
Mm-hmm.
Judgment and the I just forgot what it is. It's the attainment card in Coins or Pentacles. I've forgotten where it comes in the sequence now.
Sorry.
10.
I was looking at my notes and
okay.
I was not paying attention to what you were saying.
Judgment and the 10 of Coins, Pentacles, the Earth suit, is essentially you have everything you need for a material for this material existence. Now you get to make the choice that will let you keep it. Are there any other really common ones in the minors?
No, I think that's...
Okay.
Okay. So we generally take a minute to do sort of the LGBTQIA interpretations on this, and I'm going to start with, holy crud, I've read a bunch of queer persons' anecdotes about the tarot, or talked to a lot of queer persons who end up telling me that they hate this card because it represents God having judgment over them. It doesn't have to represent that. It does not. It is your judgment. It is your ability to assess your life and make a decision that is right for you. And if you are an LGBTQIA person in this world, that is one of your most valuable abilities. Because there's going to be people lining up around the block to tell you everything about yourself. They're going to tell you, you can't be bi. It doesn't exist. They're going to tell you that trans persons aren't welcome in certain spaces because you're somehow a danger to them. They're going to tell you that asexuals don't belong in the queer community because we're cis. There is going to be a never-ending parade of stupid trying to affect your life. And in the end, the only person who can decide whether they actually have any say over your life is you. They may have power. They may be able to deny you the right to get married or raise children. But you define your reality, and you define whether or not that's right or wrong.
It's the difference between this person tells me this, and so I guess it must be true about myself, and this person tells me this, and that's wrong, and I oppose it.
And I'm going to fight it with whatever forces I have. Now, let me pause there. Sometimes all we can fight it with is our own internal reality, not letting them define it. Sometimes that's all we have the wherewithal to fight with. Sometimes we can fight it with our words. Sometimes we can fight it with our words plus $2. Sometimes we can fight it with our words plus marching with a sign. Everyone has a different amount of spoons. So you fight it with whatever you can. And in the end, you make judgments about your reality, and you make judgments about your world. Now remember that this is part of like assessing the self and making a decision that gets you to your world.
Can I add a note here? What some people sort of disparagingly refer to as armchair activism, the internet is great for this for people with limited visibility and or limited spoons. Not right now. The things like starting a change.org petition and posting it on Tumblr and asking for a signal boost take very few spoons, very little time. You can be anyone. You don't have to be someone with a lot of privilege to speak from. And if enough people get behind it, it can still make a difference.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about when it does represent a power that's negatively affecting your life, because it can. You pull the judgment card upside down about whether or not you're going to be allowed to adopt a child. You pull the judgment card upside down over whether or not your state is going to recognize your bathroom to you, or your right to use a bathroom that matches your gender. Yes, it means you have to start at the beginning and keep fighting and keep conquering the devil and keep pulling the chariot card for the long, hard road. But it doesn't mean that they were right to make that judgment. And that's one of the things I keep seeing about the judgment card is, oh, well, it's the hand of God passing judgment. So if you pull that the judgment is wrong, then that means that the forces of synchronicity or the divine or whatever are against you, and you should just accept that. Bullshit. How come for straight people having the tarot read for them, you pull this card for a divorce and it's like, oh, I'm so sorry, the decision's going to go against you. But we pull this card for queer people and all of a sudden it's like, oh, the divine just doesn't want you to have that and you should accept it. No, it means start at the beginning, find your tools, keep fighting. That's what it means. When something makes a negative judgment against you, it doesn't mean you deserved it. Okay. I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna really quick run through spirit communication, and using this card for spells. If you're using this card, say for a legal matter combined with, say, Cascara Sagrada, I can talk, then you would set it up and you would burn your herbs that are supposed to bring you justice. If you're using this card for a transition, then you're going to combine it with things like snakeskin, eggshell powder. Thank you. Cascaria. If you're using this to communicate with any of the powers that are aligned with justice, whether that's the Hellenic idea of literally justice, or whether you're going to use it to communicate with Nemesis and say, like, hey, judgment's been made against me that's wrong, and I need your help breaking these chains.
Or if it's related with cleverness and good judgment.
Talk to Toth.
Talk
to, if you're using this card for communicating with a power about you making this next step in your spiritual journey, talk to Anubis. He literally weighs the heart against the feather on the scale.
Yeah.
So he's a very good figure for talking to with judgment.
You could meditate, like we brought up Crossing the Abyss. This could be a card that you meditate on or with for that, standing in judgment of yourself.
You want a judgment to go your way. Maybe print the card up and carry it in your wallet with you and try and draw its power into your life that way. That's basically our class for today. I actually ran 15 minutes past on a day that Ian has somewhere to go. So please feel free to contact me about this card via email or via the comments below.
I think we did cover it.